Such a long video just on the machine gun? Oh yes, there's a lot to say about it. The kid's Browning doesn't look bad until you take a closer look. And I don't mean the bent barrel. Look at the bolts, they're a bit soft to say the least. The molded on cradle is just ridiculous. The barrel is slide molded, but the muzzle is way too thick. The HST will be used for a die I've been planning for years, and it'll take years to finish. It would kill my joy of building that die if the .50 cal looked like that. I ordered an upgrade set, and so the gun sights and the handle had to be removed. The barrel had to go too. Here you can see what's left of the M2. A hole of 0.6mm for the new barrel would have been enough, but I wanted to have some room for corrections. Okay, and now let's look at the upgrade set. I don't know the brand of the machine gun RB model used as base, but it's plain to see that it looks way better than the Hobby Boss rendition. Barrel, heat shield and handle look really nice. As you see, it's a rather small set, so let's see what I got for €4.50. What you get is what you see. The PE fret consists of the bracket for the handles, the loading mechanism, the gun sights and the barrel's handle. The parts look very nice and will make a real big difference. Then we have the heat shield. It's a beautifully turned piece of brass with all holes drilled out precisely. The left part belongs on the rear of the heat shield and the right one on the front. Here are the handles, 3 identical pieces. One is for loading the machine gun. And then we have the barrel. I'm sorry for the glare, but you'll see better pics of it in a couple of seconds. The muzzle is drilled out, and this is deep enough to look realistic. If you watched my review on RB Model's 8.8 gun barrel, you know that they do everything to save the forests. No paper is wasted, not even on a small instruction sheet. Well, I had this ABAR upgrade set and I had built it for the M7 Priest. Now I use the instructions after blocking out all parts that are missing on the RB model set. I'm glad that the barrel's handle comes as just one part. The missing grain isn't too bad either, since it would hardly be visible. The missing pins may be an issue for the assembly. You already saw that barrel and heat shield come in 4 parts. I decided to assemble those 4 parts first. I used CA glue gel. While the glue was curing, something struck me. The kid's machine gun. Something was wrong with it. If you need good reference for US and German infantry weapons, you can still use the old Tamiya sets. I compared the Tamiya M2 to the kid's .50 and then I saw it. Apart from the soft details, the Hobby Boss MG was also too short. How can this be? 2mm are more than just a bit out of scale. If you keep in mind that the Tamiya set was released in 1981, the details are still very crisp. The Hobby Boss kit was released in 2007 and there isn't much that deserves to be called details. There are nicer machine guns than the Tamiya ones now, but I was disappointed that Hobby Boss did such a poor job on it. I decided to use the Tamiya MG, but since there was no PE cradle, I used the Hobby Bus part as template for scratch building one. I made a couple of attempts with burnishing the shape onto a piece of tape. Finally I came up with 3 pieces, one for each side. They were cut out and attached to a piece of 0.1mm brass sheet. After outlining them, I used an awl to score the bending lines. The holes were drilled out before cutting out the cradle. I used a pair of scissors and a diamond file. Scissors bend the brass, and so I flattened it out again with flat pliers. I added a piece of styrene sheet to the lower front portion of the body. The scratch build handle would need some stability since the brass sheet is very thin. Here's the cradle. I used flat pliers to bend it into shape. There's a small bracket sitting at the front of the cradle. I used the cradle to determine the bracket's width. Again, the holes were drilled out before cutting it out. Here you can see what it looks like and where it'll be attached. The machine gun had to be drilled out to accommodate the bolt. At the rear end of the cradle there are 2 more brackets. The narrow one is attached to the Browning while the wider one is part of the cradle. It was extremely fiddly to align all 3 parts properly and push the bolt through all the 0.4mm holes. The MG ring on the HST's top is a skate rail, so the Browning is sitting on a skate. The mount for it had to be scratch built too. I used a piece of cardboard as template for outlining the sights on the brass sheet. The bending lines were scored and the hole for a rod of copper wire was drilled out. Then it was cut out and sanded. I used a 0.4mm wire to attach the mount to the cradle. The 0.8mm holes I drilled out on the cradle were necessary to have some room for proper alignment. And here we have it. Cradle and mount glued into place. Now let's continue with the sets parts. The loading mechanism and the bracket for the handles were next. I only bent one of the bracket sides perpendicular to the center part before gluing it into place. This way it was easier to add the handles. While the CA glue was curing, I took care of the rear side. Bending wasn't as simple as I had hoped because there weren't any real bending lines. The center is a bit thicker than the sides and that's all the help you get. Since there aren't any holes on the larger part, pins on the side wouldn't have made sense. Nonetheless, they would have helped and also added a lot of stability. Well, apart from dropping on the floor at least once, I managed to attach the side where it belonged. Then I added the 3 handles and was quite happy so far. The front side wasn't easy to bend at all. The able part had multiple bending lines to make bending the half circle very simple. The RB model part didn't have any bending lines. Also, the flat part that had to be glued on the MG's body was very small and almost impossible to hold on to. I used a 0.4mm drill bit I had attached to the cutting mat. It held the part in place and was used to bend it. The result isn't what I'd call great, but I was glad I managed to bend it at all. The barrel's handle was the last part of the set. I rolled it under a 1mm drill bit to achieve the round shape. It'll be the last part to be glued to the machine gun because it's a bit flimsy and would surely snap off if I added it too early. These 2 chains come from the Edward set for the priest. They'll be attached later. The Hobby Boss ammo box for the M2 was another part that didn't look as good as I would have expected. Since I already used the Tamiya MG body, I decided to use the matching box for it. It looks quite nice as long as it's closed, but I wanted it to be open. A bit of work was necessary to achieve the desired look. At first I removed the bottom. Then I sanded it down from the inside until it was thinner than 0.2mm. I also sanded down the lid and attached the rim of 0.1mm brass sheet. The new bottom for the box was made from brass too. Here are the parts. This is one of the areas that needed more sanding. I cut a couple of times into the hinge to make it look more realistic. You want to be careful or you'll cut too deep. The ammo box needed a carrier and I thought I could use the ABA part I had left. Unfortunately, the box was too big, so I had to scratch build one. I used the box to outline the bottom and the PE part to outline the sides. I marked the holes with my awl and drilled them out with a 1.4mm drill bit. Somehow I'm glad that the box will cover the holes. I wasn't as precise as I had wanted to be. All bending lines were scored and so I cut out the piece. I bent the carrier in several steps and used CA gel for gluing the small contact areas together. After cutting the brace for hanging the carrier to the cradle to size, it snapped off. It didn't matter that much because it was in the wrong position anyway. I folded a narrow strip of brass sheet till I had 3 layers. After that I folded the brace and glued the part to the carrier. Here's what it looks like on the machine gun. The body seamline is visible although it was removed properly. The steel-colored styrene makes it look like that. Here's the complete .50, well, almost complete. The box's lid had to be glued into place and it had to be done with the box sitting in the carrier. I found this big of an actual turret mount with cradle and carrier a bit too late. I would have added a couple of things, but at least I had a PE part for the clamp on the left hand side. It also comes from the Edward set for the priest. It looks very nice and it was easy to shape with all the bending lines. It won't be attached to the box before I have added an ammo belt. My Browning could use the butterfly trigger. Here it is on the ABA fret, but it is way too big, and it sits in the wrong position. The RB model handle is much narrower than the ABA one, so it wasn't easy to replicate the trigger. I tried to cut it out from brass sheet several times, but I always cut off one of the wings. My last resort was to make it from thin copper wire. I bent it into a V shape and squeezed it with flat pliers. Then I scraped off the plating and glued it directly under the top part of the handle. After the glue had cured, I cut off the ends. Yes, one wing is a bit longer, but both wings end more or less flush with the handles. The perspective makes them look longer. Now it was time to attach handle and chains, and that concluded the build. The upgrade set isn't as well detailed as the ABA set I used before, but it's also less than half the price. I guess I got what I paid for. I'm not a PE fan, but I like the details I was able to add to the Browning. If I didn't scratch build many items from copper and brass sheet, I might have given up on the sights. Those of you who deal with PE on a regular basis won't find it overly difficult to build this set. Would I use it again? I think so, because I don't know any cheaper way to upgrade a styrene .50 cal. Would I recommend buying it? It depends on your skills. Beginners could get frustrated while trying to bend the sides. Only you can assess your abilities, and therefore you have to judge for yourself whether you can assemble this set. It improves the styrene MG. That can't be denied.
That's all, folks.